Well, I think no story of Black History Month can be completed or even started without talking about the work of Dr. Congressman Woodson. Woodson, of course, was the first professionally trained Black historian and father of Black History Month. He was the founder of this group called the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, which is now the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. It's a 170-year-old organization based in Washington, D.C., but founded here at Wabash in September 9, 1915. Well, one of the things about Woodson, he was in Chicago studying at the university. He was a postgraduate at U of C. And at the same time, around summer of 1915, there was a huge celebration sponsored by the state of Illinois, the Jubilee Celebration for the end of slavery, down at this place called the Coliseum Auditorium, which is somewhere in the south. There's a dog park there now, which was built. About 25,000 people or so, exhibitors and people coming to the convention to see just how far Black people have come since the end of enslavement. So Woodson was there, and he was there with a colleague of his from Washington, D.C., William Hartgrove, teaching high school at the time. And we speculate that he was here selling posters. He was really very much into Black history and putting Black history out in the world for people to consume it. He had an office here at the Y, and the story goes he comes back after attending the Jubilee Celebration, and he pulls together a number of individuals, movers and shakers, A.L. Jackson, James Stamp, Woodson himself, and George Cleveland Hall, who was a surgeon. They were all very prominent Black men here in Chicago, and they had a meeting here, and they formed and founded the Association for the Study of Black History. A few years later, Woodson goes back to Washington, D.C., incorporates a sala there, starts a Journal of Negro History, which is one of the oldest Black history professional journals that exists. In 1937, he puts out the Negro History Bulletin, which his first publisher and editor was Mary Thune. But I think the important part for our story about Black History Month is that in 1926, Woodson comes back to the Wabash Y. This is a story about Tim Black, the late Tim Black. And most of us who study history, when Tim Black says something happened, we believe that it happened. So Tim Black says that his father brings him here to hear Dr. Woodson declare the beginning of Negro History Week, which was just, the second week in February, the week that corresponded with the birthdays of Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. Part of the story is that Woodson wanted to work with teachers. Again, he was a high school principal at the time, and bring the story of the so-called Negro into the curriculum so that Black children can see themselves in history. But if Woodson was alive, they would call him a multiculturalist because he believed in really integrating all types of history into the larger American history narrative. But it started really as a grassroots movement. Teachers got involved, churches got involved, interest groups got involved, reading groups. Now, one of the important things about Woodson is that he's got his education late, so he understood about really the love of education outside of school-age children. He didn't graduate high school until he was 20 years old. He was a ability about he loved books. So he brought that information and tried to bring it into the community just by starting branches around the country. Chicago has a branch here. There's about 52 branches of the association around the country. So that's really how he really got involved, bringing the churches and schools and people who have an interest in history. I think the important thing to understand about the association and Woodson's work is, as it stands now, the association is really a large group of academics, but there's also a large constituency of lay people who just love history. And I think the important part of thinking about Black History Month is when Woodson started the association, he was only a PhD in it. So people who were involved in it had a love, and had a story to tell, and had a mission to tell, to promote, disseminate, and preserve the history of African American people in the country. We've done some research on some of the issues within the journal, and one of the things that jumps out at us is that there, again, we're not a lot of professionally trained historians publishing in the journal. So what we speculate is that Woodson was ghostwriting a lot of these early articles. So you're talking about, he did this very famous work on, the African slave trade, early history, the great first Black achievements. But I think his seminal work is of course, the miseducation of the Negro, in which Woodson takes on the education system and how Black children are being miseducated, and really gives ideas and a really a call to action on how we should better educate our children and Black people in general about the true story of Black people. Okay, so one of the things that we can't deny is just really the importance of the South Side of Chicago as a space for Black people. It was a major hub for the Great Migration. It was a major hub for Black politics, Black employment. And again, to go back to what Tim Black was saying, is that I think Harlem in New York gets a lot of press for the Harlem Renaissance and everything, the cultural explosion that comes out of New York City. But Tim Black would always go around and say that if Harlem was the center of Black America, then Chicago was the center of the Black world, which if you think about just how many things come through here, sports, the Negro Leagues have a very strong connection here, the Chicago Black Renaissance, which was a larger, more dynamic movement of art and culture than we see in the Harlem Renaissance. We got the first Black president here, the first Black female congressman, the first Black mayor who lived in this neighborhood, one of the most segregated cities in the United States, if not the world. So just so many things have come out of Black Chicago that, I didn't find it very unusual that Woodson was here at that time. Because he saw just how dynamic the community was. This was a city of go-getters, people who I think what I call practice aspirational politics. Black people came to Chicago during the Great Migration. They aspired to be something better. Oscar DePriest, the first Black congressman after Reconstruction, was from here. Arthur Burks Mitchell, the first Black Democratic congressman, lived in Chicago. Margaret Burroughs, all these people came to Chicago from other places to make their mark on John Jones, right? John Jones was a great orator, a person who single-handedly took a cause to end Black codes in Illinois, who had died as one of the richest Black men in the country. He was some would say he was the second most important African American in the 19th century, second only to Frederick Douglass, and he was in Chicago. So there was something about this city that drew people here. We get the corresponding week between Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. Then it moves into, by 1976, it becomes Black History Month. Gerald Ford, President Ford declares February Black History Month. And then it moves on from there. A good story between Woodson's organization and the federal government, I think, starts with this thing with Gerald Ford. I think most people don't know that there's a presidential proclamation comes out in February, and it talks about the theme for Black History Month and really the year, the entire year. That theme comes out of Woodson's organization. We work very closely with the White House, past a number of administrations, except for the last one, we didn't get an invite to the White House there. But we work with the White House to talk about how our theme can be incorporated into the presidential proclamation. We've had a lot of success in getting these things done. This year's theme is Black Health and Wellness. Last year's theme was the Black Family. And there's some projects going on with the White House and the association now to try to get some programming out at the national level. And generally cover very salient and relevant issues for Black people, if not, not only Black people, but really for all of us in the country. I think this building, the Rosenwald Apartments, and the George Clinton Hall Library all tells about how the commitment that Roosevelt had to Black causes. This was one of the first YMCA's that was open that Black people could use. The Roosevelt apartments down, on Michigan Avenue, down in Michigan, a project to provide affordable housing to the Black middle class. The George Clinton Hall Library, which Roosevelt contributed a certain amount of money for the building and for the land, was the first Black library that was used for Black people. Two great librarians, Vivian Harsh and Charlemagne Rollins, who had a commitment to Woodson's mission, had a commitment to the study of liberation of Black history, started a children's book section, started the basis for the Vivian Harsh collection, which was one of the nation's largest repository of Black history archival information. So I think there was this perfect storm. The building was built right before the Great Migration started. The Y was one of the clearinghouses for new migrants. They were one of the first places they would come after they got the train from Mississippi and Alabama and this in Arkansas. They would come here to try to find a job, to try to reconnect with family people. family members who came before them to try to find housing. This was really essentially the town square right here at the Wabash Y. This was, everyone was coming. That's a really good question. I think, as with a lot of Black institutions, people move away from them. I think the neighborhood changed a lot. Once African Americans could move out of segregated Black Chicago, they did, and they took their money and their time and their resources to other communities. Just as a decline in the neighborhood, people stopped coming to the YMCA. And I think the Y had a commitment to do other things. As I mentioned before, I used to work out here, and there was a great deal of tension between the brand new Southside YMCA over on 63rd Street and this one. And I think more and more resources got funneled into the YMCA over there than they did here, and they chose to close the building, which I think had a very severe impact to Black culture. I think outside of the Great Migration and other things, there was so many other things that came out of this building. The late Conrad World started, really tried to develop a renewed interest in track and field among African American youth, which culminated, I think, in that beautiful field house out on Cottage Road, on 3rd and Cottage Road. He used to tell stories about running track there. There was a track here, and people would come here and play basketball and run track, and and that was important. These were important outlets for Black children to be able to exercise and get outside and do productive things. And as the neighborhood changed, I think that impacted places like the Wabash Y. One of my mentors, Darryl Scott, who's at Howard, he's also grew up in Chicago. He talks about America as being a history wasteland. We tear down so many things in this country to build something new, because I think progress needs to carry newness equals progress, and unfortunately sometimes progress gets in the way of history. If we look at places in Europe or in Asia or in Africa, there's this concerted effort to maintain a part of your history by incorporating current architecture with old architecture. I'll just give you an example. I traveled to Rome and to see these 2,000-year-old walls next to a building built in 1970. I think there was an understanding that we have to preserve history. And I don't think, given the current controversies about how we teach history and study history, I think there's a movement in America to get rid of things that aren't painful, things that we don't find useful anymore. And as a historian, I'm very disturbed by that. I think this area is really important for not just the Y, but the Chicago Bee Library, which is right around the corner, Anthony Overton's building, over the Hygienic Company, and one of my favorite places in Chicago, the Southside Community Arts Center. There's so many things within walking distance. The original Chicago Defender building is not too far from here. And there's so many things. The Supreme Life building, 35th and King Drive, the Doughboy statue, the old Illinois Youth Armory. There's so much history in this, within a mile and a half of this particular building. This is the epicenter of everything that makes us Black Chicagoans, Black Chicago. There's a controversy behind Black History Month that people say a number of different things. But I think there's an argument that Black History Month should be more than just a month. It should be something we celebrate 365 days a year. It's because a very vital and important part of American history, of human history, and it's something that we should appreciate even with all the pain. I think part of the controversy is people want to avoid pain, but if we learn valuable lessons through pain, we learn not to repeat some of the negative aspects that we've done against each other in the past. And that's one of the true ways, if we're going to move forward, we got to really acknowledge what we've done to people and where we are, where we come from as people, and where we can go as a community. Well, I think that as many people who can come down to the Y and arrange a tour should come down here, because it's truly one of the true gems of the South Side. And I'm so very happy that there's a commitment by so many dedicated groups to tell this story, to keep everything going forward.